and we'll just correct the record and we'll just move forward. So I think Matt, with that, if we could move into the formal meeting.
We're recording.
All right. Perfect. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our second Medical Cannabis Board meeting of 2026. I think we're going to get started here shortly. We are down a couple board members, but that's okay. And I think just a quick housekeeping item, just as a new policy, if there are any members of the media on the call, could you please identify yourself, just so that we could document that? Or if there isn't, Matt, a specific way for them to raise their hand, could you please send an email to our office inbox from the agenda? It's medical.cannabis@hhs.iowa.gov. And Matt, does that kind of reconcile that requirement for now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So please do that for us if you could, and we'll get started. I'll hand it over to you, Captain McKelvey.
Okay. I officially call to order the July 24th, 2026 Iowa Medical Cannabis Board meeting at 10:04 a.m. For those joining us virtually, if you would like to speak during the public comment period, please send an email expressing your interest to medical.cannabis@hhs.iowa.gov. Item 2 is the roll call. When I announce your name, please indicate if you're here. Dr. Richards,
Here.
Dr. Schreck,
Here.
Dr. Weber,
Here.
Dr. Mokadem, Dr. Garvin, and Nurse Practitioner Brown. Okay. Item 3, approval of minutes. It is now time to approve the minutes from March 27th, 2026 Medical Board meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review these minutes? Are there any questions or edits to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I would like to entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
So moved.
Okay, Dr. Richards, is there a second?
Second, Schreck.
Dr. Schreck, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that should carry that motion. Item 4, the public comment period. We've set aside this time to allow any members of the public who would like to address the board. All speakers are asked to keep their comments to 3 minutes. If you've not previously registered or do not do so during the call to order, please do so now with the instructions provided. You will be called upon individually when it is your opportunity to speak. Owen or Bobby, do you know if there's any in-person commenters?
Yes, we do have a list, Captain McKelvey.
Okay.
And Matt, I believe you have that. So if we have the first commenter kind of in order, if you could search for them. I believe the first one is Carl. Okay, we got Tyson. Okay, all good. All right, so Tyson, I think you kind of know the drill here. I'll keep time for you, and I'll kind of let you know when you get close and allow you to kind of finish your thought, and you can begin anytime you'd like, Tyson.
All right, thank you. I've made mention at other meetings about my trip to Malta to see its legal system there, how they are dealing with things. This October, I'm traveling to Morocco, which is a world producer of hash, and Amsterdam, who's had a long-standing tradition of not legalization, but not interfering. Because one thing all 3 of these places have in common is they view their cannabis legislation as harm reduction. Certainly, we have some changes coming up as soon as August 17th with rescheduling. Plenty of time to, make considerations before the November 7th meeting. But to speak on harm reduction, these places have seen a a drop in black market activity. But people choose to follow even the most strict rules over breaking the law, period. Um, there's a quality improvement that comes along with all of this, testing requirements. That gets rid of people that can't provide the quality that's demanded by these systems. Um, there's been mention of bad actors in the cannabis and the hemp space by this board in the past. They won't last under a harm reduction model because they won't be able to meet the requirements. I think if a strong set of rules and regulations gets put in place, Iowa will be a much better state for it. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tyson. Who is the next public commenter in the list? I believe it should be Carl or Steve. And Carl? Okay. Do we have you, Carl?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, we got you. And you can begin when you'd like, Carl. And again, you know the drill as much as anybody.
Yeah. This is Carl Olson. I really appreciate this board. Great idea of the legislature creating this board and with the composition that it has. After the last board meeting, the federal government moved state medical marijuana to Schedule 3, consistent with international treaty provisions pursuant to 21 USC 811D. That allows the Attorney General to bypass formal rulemaking and make an instant rule. So that happened. Non-medical marijuana remains in Schedule 1. So we got it in two schedules here, while the federal government continues moving it to Schedule 3 pursuant to 21 USC 811A, which is the normal formal rulemaking. The decision to bypass formal rulemaking is currently being challenged in the U.S. Court of Appeals, and MedFarm Iowa has intervened in that case, or filed a motion to intervene. I think it'll be granted. Not one state has authorized medical marijuana by rescheduling it. In Iowa, for example, there's no mention of Chapter 124E in the schedules of Chapter 124. There's a short exemption for medical marijuana in the enforcement section, Section 4015C. So it's an exemption in state law. I mean, and all the states are like that. Considering the new federal rules were adopted without formal rulemaking and haven't been thoroughly vetted yet, I would ask the board to continue recommending a legal task force to explore federal exemption under 21 USC 822D, which is also consistent with treaty provisions. Even if this new federal rule is invalid, all of marijuana could still end up in Schedule 3 before the midterm elections. Just like Tyson said, the board can revisit this question in November because it's fluctuating, so who knows where it'll land. So for now, please keep recommending a legal task force to work on federal exemption. Thank you very much, and I will yield the rest of my time.
Sounds good. Thank you, Carl.
Yep, you're welcome.
And Carl called out, very good summary, and we'll go into, some of those mechanics for the board and some of the timelines and the things that are happening in one of our agenda items. So I think that would leave Steve, I believe, is the only other person on the list that reached out to us. Are you able to identify him, Matt?
Yes. Are we here?
Oh, yep. Yeah, we have you, Steve.
Thank you.
You can begin when you'd like.
I had sent an email to the the medical cannabis group. I'll just be brief on my summaries of that. You can read the full document in those emails. I'm talking about a couple reports that are just released recently about opioid consumption and the use of inhaled cannabis. That there was a significant association between self-reported use of cannabis to manage unregulated opioid withdrawal and reduction in opioid use following cannabis use. People used unregulated opioids as well. and most were living with pain. Some further information was of those participants, 66.3% agreed that when they used cannabis, they did not need to consume as much as the opioid that they were taking. And after adjusting for such factors as age, race, and pain levels, researchers determined that using marijuana to manage withdrawal was associated with more than twice the odds of reporting reduced opioid use, indicating that cannabis use for opioid withdrawal was significantly associated with self-reported reduction in opioid use. Having a grandson who is a opioid user and now using the Suboxone or I'm sorry, I don't remember the term. Maybe your doctors would help out there. To trying to withdraw, but now he's stuck in this loop of this Suboxone without being fully withdrawn from the opioids. He still has to have the weekly or daily substance. So I don't know whether you're trading Peter for Paul or whatever, but anyway, I'm continuing on with the other facts. Our findings that contribute to the growing body of evidence that demonstrates that intentional cannabis use to mitigate symptoms of unregulated opioid withdrawal may support reduction in opioid use, especially among people living with pain, which was my grandson had fallen from a roof and severed some nerves. Anyway, importantly, cannabis is associated with markedly lower risk of morbidity and morbidity compared to unregulated opioids. Immediate efforts to improve access to legal cannabis, especially for the structurally marginal people who use the drugs illegally, are the highest risk of overdose, and may offer a step towards reducing the health and social harm of opioid use by smoking cannabis. These findings, they stated, supported conducting experimental trials of cannabinoids in support of individuals experiencing this withdrawal and living with the pain. States
That does complete your. I'll let you
okay.
finish your thought here, Stephen. No, it's no
Yes,
problem. I'll let
sure.
you finish your thought here, but that does complete your 3 minutes.
Okay. So I lost my place now. States that legalize medical or recreational marijuana see significant reductions in opioid overdoses among adults with employer-sponsored health insurance, indicating that the substitution effect may be in play. And I relieve my time.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Stephen.
I believe we have one more
Okay.
who emailed the proper channels. That'd be Earl.
Okay. Hey, Earl, do we have you?
You got me. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, we have you, Earl, and you can begin when you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you. So my name is Earl Ramey. I'm coming up on a decade of being an Iowa Medical Card holder who has relied on this program since day one. As a fully licensed Iowa producer with established vested rights, holding a USDA producer license, a DIA food processing license, an HHS Bureau Cannabis hemp license, and an Iowa State degree for good manufacturing practices. I'm agreeing with previous comments fitting a natural botanical plant to fit Schedule 3 as restricted pharmaceutical only model. What we need here is a all industry fit for all involved, a clean state exemption model anchored with Iowa's code, like Carl was talking about, reflecting back on, like Dr. Schreck makes statements in the past and some other board members comments on the quality. He's often expressed pride in our state's medical license manufacturers and rigorous controls. We're on just these same controls. You guys see all of our paperwork. You guys are the ones that oversee it all. Our consumable hemp and retailer recreational seltzers and fairway from all the products. I think these all need to be governed under the same rule because you look at our medical sides producers, they are agricultural producers that run under like driftless extracts, chem and industry, USDA producers that we're supplying bulk ingredient. This bulk ingredient can be used through manufacturing of medical, recreational, holistic, seltzers, whatever the company wants to do with it. And they could slap a label on it and call it whatever for the company, or you can send it out bulk supply and they can bottle and package it itself. For instance, look at the Minx powder. You got a recreational version called kind culture. Same powder, same type of extraction, same type of process. Iowa acts like there's only one that can do it. That one does it for every other industry too, you know. But here it's called medical, and in the surrounding state, it's recreational. You can literally buy the same exact manufacturer products in the surrounding state as a recreational product. I visited Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, all of them. Several of these states we can find Bud and Mary's in, and they sell recreational products there. Kimman produces a inhalable vapor. You can vaporize raw flower. We expressed this before. They produce it under the USDA. It's been in Food Business Magazine. It's an inhalable raw cannabidiol flower. My license says I produce a product called cannabis. That cannabis can be medical grade, or it could be cannabidiol grade, not medical, cannabidiol grade, CBD, and as long as it complies, it can be used for any manufacturers. I'm just saying we need one program that works for all and stop consternating the industry with what most people don't know about. You know, most people don't know that this is the same stuff. No matter how you look at it, it's the same thing. You know, just get rid of the chemicals out of it and give that to the recreational consumable side. Keep your medical side that's been there since 1921. Iowa code has hemp going all the way back to 1921, and DEA's already rescheduled dronabidol with other names: Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 6, all these deltas for research and development. 1999, 1308, 13 or 14. I do believe you can see that it's been rescheduled already over 20 years, 27 years ago, to be a matter of fact. So now we're looking at just the plant.
Earl, that does complete your test. So I'll allow you to kind of finish your thought here. That's
nope,
okay.
Just saying the Schedule 3's got so much consternation in it because it's already been done 27 years ago. 1308, 13. Federal Code of Registration. Look at it. It's there. And it's got other names that covers all your deltas, 8s, 9s, 10s, whatever. In Iowa, changed that in 2027 or 28 to any forms. So anyway, I appreciate all you guys and your work. Take care.
Thank you, Earl.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Are there, did anybody else, kind of towards the beginning of the meeting identify themselves as wanting to provide comment, or does that complete our commenter list?
That is everyone on the list in front of me.
Okay. Sounds good. I think, with that, we can move on to the next agenda item. Captain McKelvey?
Okay. Thank you for everyone that shared their information.
Actually, Captain, maybe we'll, I just did see that Maggie had sent a chat, so we can we please identify Maggie so she can provide a comment here, Matt?
Yes, Maggie Ballard.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we have you, Maggie. You can begin when you'd like.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me come in late. I just wanted to share that this is kind of a time when there are some proposed changes happening at the federal level. And so looking at what's happening perhaps at the federal level and then what we have going on across different states, I've just been comforted by the work that this board has done to keep the program as medical or medicinal as possible. So there are concerns that I have around the vaporizing the THC, just because I've seen a lot of reports and studies over the last couple of months talking about some breakdowns of the differences between consuming the flower, which of course we know is harmful, versus edibles, versus tinctures, versus the vape form. And then of course there's other data that goes into like the dabs. And so this is something that is of course not widespread because a lot of these forms are somewhat new. But I am comforted to see that our board has really put a lot of the safety concerns for everyday Iowans ahead of some of the things that maybe this industry would like to see. For example, the products are not being sold that are really attracting kids and looking like candies and things like that. And so it's really been a step ahead of what even the legislature in Iowa was able to do for the consumable hemp products. And so that's just been of great comfort to me. And I have the greatest sympathy for the patients enrolled in the program that want to consume it in the least restrictive form possible for themselves. But I appreciate the board always weighing that against what is considered to be scientific and medical and safe for our general public. So with that, I will yield the rest of my time.
That's good. Thank you, Maggie. And just one quick call. Did anybody else come in at the last moment? Matt or team?
Not seeing anyone in the chat.
Okay, sounds good. I apologize for that, Captain McKelvey. We'll move on to the next item here.
Item 5 on the agenda are 2026 Bureau updates. So Owen will provide us an update on Bureau and federal happenings. These items will also be combined by a discussion on introducing the board's recommendations for the 2026 annual report. The board is welcome to ask questions at any time. Thank you, Owen.
All right, sounds good here. I'm just on my laptop here this morning. So let me make sure that we can do this here. So does anybody, can everybody see my screen here? We good?
Looks good.
Okay, sounds good. And if anybody has any question, okay, no, I can see you on the right here. So if anybody has any questions, just stop me anytime. And so just about what we'll cover. We did have a bill, that was signed this year to kind of, just a couple kind of basic things. One of which was, that we, may issue 5 additional licenses. I'm sure the board is aware that that was one of their recommendations. They would also allow for out-of-state patients to receive cards that essentially remove the residency requirement. So we'll also discuss we kind of mentioned at the last meeting, right? The theme of this year, some of those happenings going on at the federal level and giving you, an update, a little bit of timeline. Some of what Carl mentioned, right? That there are kind of parallel paths moving at the same time here. I think as it relates to the board, also just give a brief update on the CMI pilot study that was also came out of some of that activity towards the end of 2025, which was really kind of in some respects, right, a practitioner-led, federal medical cannabis program in a sense, but with the cannabinoid hemp products. So I'll give just a little bit of an update on that. And then also, I think just again, as it relates to all this activity happening at the federal level, just a brief update on some of the things that have been happening with those, hemp changes at large, with the changes to the, container limits and just how that, just what we're seeing there. And then we'll kind of finish up with the introduction of our annual report recommendations. So on HF 990, so on June 2nd, Governor Reynolds signed that bill. And again, I gave an intro on it. So again, it changes that a patient, doesn't have to be a resident of the state of Iowa, but they still would have to get a certification from an Iowa licensed practitioner. So none of the other mechanics around card registration changed other than that residency requirement. So also, I think the board is aware that, only patients with registration cards issued by us can purchase products at a dispensary. That's not necessarily the case for other states, right, where their dispensaries may accept cards from other states to purchase under the medical program. That didn't change for us. Any patient, doesn't matter if they're, right, from Illinois or Missouri or whatever, if they're a medical cannabis patient, they would still have to get a card from us to purchase there. And we were able to, do these kind of system changes with our online application and everything on July 1. And at this point, we do get a few of these applications per day, but at this point, it's still a little bit less than 50, that we've received. Again, we released a communication through our listserv, but other than that, didn't necessarily create a ton of awareness about it. So we'll just see how that continues to roll out. On the licensing 5 additional dispensaries, just a reminder that this is a may, not a shall. So really, there's really no timeline for this at this point. I certainly can say, that we are kind of just doing internal, research on, how that could occur, but really nothing material to update the board on with regards to that.
Oh, and I've got a question about that.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. In your review in the department of any applications, do you take into consideration the economic competitiveness? In other words, as I recall, originally when we had five dispensaries, a
Yep.
couple of them didn't make it because there just wasn't
Yep.
the market. And then you have to balance that against the geography of,
Of course.
many miles to go around. I presume all those issues are on the table.
Yeah, I mean it's right, it's kind of limited, on what we can consider. I mean certainly viability is always going to be a concern, I think, but again, I think as the board has mentioned on other topics, right, explicit, vibe is not always, right, we're just here to kind of implement the law as it is. So I think while it's certainly a factor, right, it's not necessarily like explicitly, one that I guess if I know it's kind of a non-answer, a little bit of word salad for you, Dr. Shrek, but I mean, I guess it's kind of a yes and no type of thing, if that
As
makes
Dr.
sense.
Bridges has pointed out, one of our charges is not to guarantee the financial security of any of these uh,
Yeah.
shareholders here. The other question is, as I recall, wasn't there a limit to how many dispensaries any one entity could own? Is that the case? And is
That actually did get in the final form. That was not in there. So as it was moving through, I think it did have a limit of three per, entity, or of sorts. But that was not in the final one. So really, so for instance, I'm sure Iowa Cannabis Company has three licenses. So if they wanted to participate in any future procurement, there's nothing stopping them from doing that. So,
thank you.
yep.
Uh, Owen, if I'm not mistaken, there is no mail order capability, is there, as far as the geographic distribution?
No, that would obviously, right, the mail is a federal type of deal. So that is not applicable to cannabis, right? But I think again, as we've talked about with this dichotomy with hemp and cannabis and, federal legality with some of the hemp products, right? That there's a ton of direct to consumer business that happens in that regard. But, as it relates to our medical cannabis products, that's not currently available. I mean,
Yeah,
I think maybe that's like one of the potential, questions with some of the rescheduling thing to be reconciled farther down the road. But yeah, nothing at this
It
point.
just seems that the distribution, the financial capability of certain parts of Iowa for an entity like this to survive is minimal.
Yeah.
And no matter whether or not, so that just seemed to me be a potential, okay, avenue.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, but again, we would not, like you said, the mail is federal and, we certainly wouldn't make the rules, for them. But let me see here. So now I'll just kind of talk a little bit about the rescheduling thing. And this is where, Katie also, obviously I'll give you carte blanche to chime in, at any time. I'm going to give kind of like a high level, not necessarily go into the super detailed stuff per se, but do want to give you just an overview of this in general if we haven't done so yet. So just kind of a quick primer on the CSA, right? It's what establishes the procedures for how these substances are, placed into the scheduling regime, how they, review medical use, potential for abuse, safety, all those types of things. And that, right, I think, the board has commented on this, public commenters have commented on it, right, that we have essentially the same plant under different schedules, but it's really procedures, right, that dictate this. So again, as we've seen, right, where the administration can initiate these things, DOJ can administrate these things. There's multiple ways that it can be initiated. But in any case, right, it's the FDA and HHS that kind of perform that scientific assessment, that make the referral. DA schedules substances through the rulemaking process. I think I think again, as Carl pointed out, that's one of the things at play with the lawsuits. And then again, there's consideration with the international treaties, which we'll kind of get into a little bit, because that's kind of the mechanism that the administration on the DOJ had used. So what do these international treaties allow related to marijuana? So I won't go into details on the articles, right? But it does allow marijuana sales exclusively for medical, or scientific purposes. Recreational use is prohibited, and it requires member nations to essentially create a monopoly over the wholesale trade of this. And just so everyone's aware, right? This already is happening with like a lot of the companies in Canada, right, where they are under these conventions. They are, shipping medical marijuana to some of the EU member states. And this is kind of, so again, in respects, it's already happening, globally. But this is kind of the step that the U.S. has taken too. So just a little bit of a timeline, okay, right? And again, I just want to be, clear, right, that, if you recall going back a couple of years under the Biden administration and the conversations we were having at that point, right, the traditional process did start under the Biden administration. And you can kind of see the timeline here, right? They made the referral, and HHS and FDA, made their assessments, and some of these processes were, moving through. Those were stayed toward the end, to the end of that administration. And then what President Trump did, right, was to kind of pick that process back up, but then also include, as Carl, again, as a very smart man, identified, right, under 811D, the Controlled Substance Act allows DOJ to kind of just notice a rule also. So that's where this bifurcation of the pathway started, right? There's traditional process with the rulemaking, and right then there's this other pathway the DOJ took with kind of going down the treaty route and noticing the rule. So then, since our last board meeting, right, I think we were able to intro this last time, but then on April 2023, DOJ released a final order rescheduling FDA-approved medical products or state licensed medical marijuana products to Schedule 3. So you can see here in this 811D, right, it does allow the Attorney General to kind of issue an order, around this, right? And so that's just, again, a primer on where we've been since our last meeting. So under 811D of the CSA, the focus is on these treaties. It did immediately move, our state licensed medical marijuana products to Schedule 3. So that is done. That is in effect. And it's just the kind of the lawsuits that will happen, are related to if that was legal, or viable or an okay path to take. So it creates, federal illegality for these products, from DEA approved licensees. So I'll get a little bit into that, right? The registration process that the DEA has set up, but again, under that treaty, right? This does not legalize marijuana federally, or, recreational or synthetic, right? It has to be that, for medical purposes only. And again, it does not touch the status of hemp, which is excluded from the definition of marijuana. So this is just to show you, right, that this is from the, Controlled Substances Act, right? That you can see that this is in there. It's Schedule 3, and you can see that the parts that are changed, right, or subject to a state medical marijuana license, or subject to a state medical marijuana license. You can see, right, if it doesn't fall into that bucket, so whether you're talking about hemp and some of the changes that are coming up in November, or you're talking about adult use or recreational cannabis, right, that did not change. So we covered a little bit of this too, in the last meeting, right? But it's kind of, who is ultimately affected by this, right? So anyone in the medical cannabis supply chain, whether you're manufacturing, distributing, dispensing, laboratory, one of the things that it, would address, is that 280E tax burden that the board has discussed before, right? And even provided recommendations to handle. One of the things that it also opens up, right, is potentially interstate commerce amongst these DEA registrants, right? So as we know, with federal illegality, but with the state licensed facilities, everything is stuck within a force field, of the borders of that state. But what this would potentially allow for is, interstate commerce, or even, right, potentially global commerce is what's happening with, right, like Canada and the EU member states. The other big thing, right, we talked about with the treaty that said, medical and scientific purposes. So the board is very aware, right, of the issues with research and those, and just getting some of the, just having the trials or just anything done that might raise to the level of quality that you all are used to. But you would no longer need a Schedule 1 license, but you would need the Schedule 3. You'd still need FDA approval for the use of the real world products. But again, a lot of guidance is still needed, but that's where we kind of introed it at the last meeting, where it could lower the bar to be able to do some of that research. And again, but there's still, I mean, that's just the one thing I'll say, right, is amongst, as a matter of us, the regulatory community, it doesn't matter whether it's the lawsuits moving this way, that, or that way, or getting additional guidance from these federal agencies. I think, right, everyone is still a little bit on their heels a little bit, right? So there's just, however this rolls out, there's just a lot of unknowns left on how it's actually going to move and be done. This is all still very much in its infancy. So again, DEA has set up these portals to allow these medical licenses to, submit information on their, procedures, their employees, and, answer various questions. And that's been going on. I was in talking with the regulatory community, right? Every state has licensees that are submitting these applications. It's still really unknown if it's required, right? That's not necessarily in it. So that's just another one of the things that's still being discussed. I will say, right, there's still no federal floor, so right, we talked about how in other spheres, right, it doesn't matter if it's alcohol or food, right? A lot of the floor requirements for how things are done, come from the feds, and then states kind of can work within that framework. There's still nothing like that for cannabis. So there's really deference to the state marijuana rules. So whenever DEA starts to, look at compliance or do inspections, they're largely going to be doing that, as it relates to the rules that we have within our state. I will say the DEA is, we kind of talked about the expedited process with which they'd like this to move. And we have heard that, there's pilot inspections going on across the country. So Mississippi's had some, for Florida's having some, there's conversations with DEA and regulators going on in other states to kind of do these inspections. So again, this is moving. Just another item, right, is this kind of purchase and resale mechanism under, again, this convention. So again, a lot of these more granular mechanics, we really have no idea how they're going to be completed. Right now it's just about getting some of these licensees, into this system, inspecting them, maybe educating DEA a little bit. I will say, right, the DEA is broken up into regions, right? So Iowa's region is Iowa, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota, and they have been engaging with us. So those conversations, have started. And then again, interstate commerce, potentially again, we don't know anything about how that would happen or what it would look like, but under this framework, that's something that, would be available. But again, as Carl mentioned, right, lawsuits have already been filed. So this takes aim at that 811D section, and just that, maybe they bypass some of those rulemaking procedures, right? So they just went ahead and did it, maybe without some of that the formal pathways that are meant to handle this. But that's where, again, I would take a step back and say, right, that both processes are moving. So that's just important to say that what, the DOJ and Todd Blanche have done with just kind of noticing the final rule is separate from the traditional pathway that began under President Biden, and what the hearings that started at the end of June and are, just kind of wrapping up are about. But also, AGs in multiple states have participated in that lawsuit as well. And all of those have kind of been consolidated. And so we will see what happens with those cases that are on just noticing the final rule to move to Schedule 3. So just again, as I as I just want to keep reiterating, right, these are kind of parallel processes that are moving. So the traditional processes that again began under Biden, there was hearings that started on June 29th. I kind of sent the board some information that we have on kind of the TikTok of how those are going. But again, these are kind of taking into validity, right, of the assessment by, FDA and HHS, and, bringing in experts to speak to the medical use, the abuse potential, the public health implications. And one other thing is that only opponents of rescheduling were granted party status. Again, I think there was just chatter within the space about, why weren't, proponents invited, but that's just how these kind of cases work, that you kind of have to be adversely affected or aggrieved by it. So I kind of mentioned what had happened within the hearings. And so just kind of what happens next, right, is that I believe these are closed at this point. They'll be, the post-hearing findings will be ordered by the ALJ in charge. They'll recommend a decision to the DA administrator, and then they'll kind of, move forward with the traditional legal processes. And I will just say that these have been, we're getting kind of word that these are likely to be, expedited potentially, within the next 60 days or so. Maybe we'll have more information. So I think on the traditional pathway, we'll have even another update for you on at our final board meeting. So maybe I'll just, again, I think it's really hard not for some of that information to be wonky, so I just do want to take a step back and ask if there's any questions, and, maybe Katie, if there's anything else that you would add just on, keeping this as kind of, high level and to the point as possible, if there's anything else that you would add.
Yeah. Owen, from just a practical standpoint, using this more traditional method that you're talking about with the hearings, that would apply solely to a medical use of marijuana.
Correct.
That
Yep.
doesn't
Yeah, this is
comes up.
still, it's the same thing, moving state licensed medical products to Schedule 3, just by different means.
All right, but it's medical only. It's not really dealing with recreational
Correct. Yep.
changes to the law.
Yep. And recreational remains Schedule 1, and I will say that's one of the really complicated factors of this, right? Is most states, they started medical, and then, they added recreational later, whether through the legislature or through a ballot initiative, but they didn't necessarily have separate facilities for medical versus adult use cannabis, and they just allowed those medical facilities to become recreational. So now again, as Carl has mentioned, right, you have the same thing in the same facility being sold to different people under different statuses. And that's one of the things that's very difficult to untangle. And we don't know how they're going to look at that. Right. So think about a pharmacy that's selling both, Schedule 3 and Schedule 1 substances. So I think that's just one of the things, right, where I think it's fair to say that, DEAs, they get their footing with this and maybe start some inspections, right? They're focusing more on the medical markets, right? And, kind of as it relates to adult use, or the dual license is what we call them, right? Where it's both medical and adult use, kind of, I don't want to say avoiding, but just, there's more that they would need to figure out how to handle that. Does that kind of answer your question, Dr. Richard?
Oh yeah, it obviously is what I thought. It's a very complicated subject, and your comment about a pharmacy selling a legal product under one license, an illegal product under the other license, being in the pharmacy liability world that I have dealt in, that creates a real situation for how do you, quote, cover those people in that scenario? Because ultimately, if somebody's using it recreational and something bad happens, the intoxicated person in the car accident who bought it at your pharmacy, they're going to come after you, okay? And the plaintiff lawyers are going to go all they can find to come down their road. So that'd be a real can of worms.
Yeah, no, this is, again, I think that's just where I said, right, this is where it starts to get very interesting in all of the very detailed ways, right? Like, we're no longer this totally separate, adjacent industry kind of running parallel to everything normal. This is where things really kind of need to be figured out. So, Dr. Weber?
I was curious in some of the I know you attend a lot of meetings and stuff about this, Owen, but like,
Mm.
I'm trying to like walk this out, and probably it's too far ahead from where we are right now. But
Mm.
if we get FDA approved products for cannabis and they're sold through pharmacies,
Yeah.
what happens to dispensaries, right? Because they're not
Yeah.
pharmacies, not in the FDA legal sense.
Yeah.
So it's just like I just think it's like an interesting thing to think about. Like, what happens to us, right? Does this board
Yeah.
need to exist if there become FDA approved products for medical purposes that can be prescribed through a pharmacy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Doctor, we're a long ways from that, just because, right, it speaks to the Schedule 3, right, is like FDA approved products or subject to state medical marijuana licenses, right? So they're kind of treating them as, separate,
Mhm.
in a way. Um, so I mean, it's a super good question. I think there's will still continue to be some level of expansion in clinical trials on the FDA pathway, but this is just kind of, the first real attempt at, I mean, that's the other thing too, right? Is like this is an attempt to try to reconcile this in some ways, right? And just not continue on the path we were on, and we'll just kind of have to see, how it goes. There's just so many unknowns right now. And again, it doesn't matter if it's the what's happened with the lawsuits or the likely lawsuits after the first wave of lawsuits, or it's just going to take a lot of time to ferret things out. And again, I know this is probably, I feel like especially non-answery, right now. But that's just kind of the state of play.
Still a great update. Thank you.
Katie, is there any, I'll just ask you again, Katie. I don't want to, Katie's like super, been doing a lot of reviews for us, on this. So I just didn't know if you'd have any other comments, Katie, or if, it's almost just best to, keep it high level.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really great job. There is a lot of complexity of what's going on right now. Um, and like you said, we don't have a lot of answers of how this is going to all shake out in the end. There's a lot of different options on where this can go. Um, and it's probably too speculative to give any final answers on what we think is going to happen. But no, I think you did a great job of keeping this really high level.
Oh, and Bob Schreck here. The whole thing is to me absolutely fascinating to see
Yeah,
how it evolves and
no
how
doubt
quick.
about that. Yeah.
And your presentation was excellent. Your slides are very good, but I could certainly benefit myself from having a chance to review the slides. Could you
Yeah.
publish the slide deck for us
Yep.
for our
Yep.
use?
Yeah, and I apologize I didn't do that before. I usually do that. I send it to you in advance just to kind of have an understanding. So I will get this to you
Great.
afterwards.
Good, thank you.
One of the positive things that I've been listening to this, of course, I've talked about at some length, is right now a provider authorizes somebody that has a condition, and from that point forward, the provider is out of it. Okay, you're at the dispensary and you're at the mercy of what happens there. The positive I see in this is if we do get it down to FDA control, it'll get back in the hands of providers being able to follow that patient closely, adjust the doses, and work with a pharmacy to accomplish that. So some good could come out of this from my standpoint in that regard.
Yep. Yep. No doubt.
Owen,
Does-
or
Yep. Go ahead,
if I can ask, so obviously we're hopeful that there'll be some resolution here, maybe within 60 days, but obviously whatever the outcome, there's probably going to be some that are unhappy. What's the appeal process, or how long can this drag out?
I mean, and I'm sure Katie would say too. I mean, that's impossible to say, Captain McKill. I just think that we should be in the mode, right, where there's going to be concentric rings of litigation, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I would certainly expect, opponents, however it goes, to appeal. Um, so I think we'll just have to wait and see. But I mean, again, I think that's just right. This is such kind of like a big thing coming out of the shadows. This is kind of, really going for the gusto in different ways, with how it's being done. So I mean, it's likely to take quite a while to shake out. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will echo that, Chief McKelvey. This is rescheduling and utilizing a UN treaty is a really creative process that we haven't really seen before. So we're kind of in uncharted territory as far as that process being used. And the litigation potential for that is very lengthy. And even with the traditional rescheduling route through notice and comment through the Administrative Procedures Act, as we've seen, that process started many years ago and is still ongoing and has the potential to be bogged down by lawsuits and administrative delays for even more years to come. So would love to have an answer for you, but likely that this will be a lengthy legal process.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments or questions from board members just on that piece? And if not, I will give, just some updates, on the some of the hemp items, and so the CMS my pilot study, is also something that came out of that activity, in late 2025. So this program kind of, launched, so to speak, on April 1st, right? This is just kind of a mechanism through the ACOs, to kind of have a, for all intents and purposes, a federal medical marijuana program, right, directed by practitioners. If you recall, it has to be that 3 milligrams per serving type of limit. I'll get into some complications with that in a second. But at this point, there's really only, these are not publicly available, but there's only been five, ACOs across the country that have done this. My understanding is there are over 100, that have, ACOs that potentially participate. So again, these are just ones that have identified themselves and submitted applications. There's nothing actually moving forward, with any of this. I think some of the lower participation, right, is probably, obvious when we think of what those organizations are used to, just with, some of the inconsistencies with the products in general and, which ones you choose. These also the state variability is a big thing, right, that we have any ACO participating in a state has to conform with, the product regulations amongst those states. So I think I'll just say this is a even further complicating factor, right, that the products that are supposed to be, able to be part of this program, must have less than 3 milligrams of THC per serving. But these new federal limits that are going into effect because of the continuing appropriations language, right, are less than that. So this is something, right, that, not literally, I think this would be like, think of we've talked about that term, the broad spectrum products, so think about like the tincture style products, right, that have, very limited amounts of THC per serving, right, but in a full bottle, there may be 100 or more, milligrams of THC in it. So it's kind of what that program, again, that not to be explicit, but that's really the broad spectrum products are what that program is essentially trying to distribute, but they will not be allowed federally come November. So that's just something that the program is largely, if they don't find a way to untangle this or, do a carve out, it's largely to make it mostly moot. So that's just, again, never boring. A lot to ferret out with this. So that's kind of an update on that CMS my pilot study. I don't know if board members had any questions on that. And kind of, if not, I think you just asked for a brief thing. Again, it's not specifically under the board's purview, right, but those are big changes that came with that legislation, right, to reopen the government. It's, come November 12th, is going to essentially make any hemp product over 0.4 milligrams of THC per container, right? So that's the whole container. 0.4 is very low. So all those products would essentially become Schedule 1 overnight. So just to, since the last board meeting, I think we gave you a little bit of update on this, right? But there have been various, bills and things to be introduced, right? There, full repeal, trying to extend the effective date so that maybe they have more time to work through a regulatory framework. There's even one that was just introduced a couple days ago, right? That, to try to introduce a framework. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, I will just say it, the voices, in terms of the industry and what they want is still fairly fragmented. I just mean there's no really consistent uh path that they're all asking for in some respects. I think that's getting better, but still inconsistent. And just the fact of the matter is, right, we're running into the August recess here. My understanding is there's less than 15 or 20 legislative days left in general at the federal level. So so really just running out of time for anything to write to. And I think we kind of know how Congress works in general. There's quite a few things going on. I think we highlighted that at the last meeting, but again, just I think we're kind of at this point, moving forward as if it's going to going to occur. But obviously, from our standpoint, right, we have to be totally sure of that before we really start communicating anything or planning for real changes. So I don't know if does the board have any questions about that? I know Dr. Strike, you'd kind of asked about it, but
No, no, that's good news from my standpoint. As we discussed before, the original hemp law had a huge flaw, and that is nobody did the math. With the original definition of hemp, you could take a jigger of whiskey, which is about an ounce and a half, and have up to 80 milligrams of THC in it.
yeah.
And still meet the legal definition. Of course, that was the whole problem, and I think has been corrected by the current legislation. Thank you.
I think that was, right. It's right, unintended consequences. Maybe we're not a lot of compounding pharmacists, or who doesn't even take that, to understand how the math would have worked there. But I mean, I think yes. I mean, the situation we're in here, I think, is largely due to people, being really going overboard, with the potency and products, and sometimes that's how it works. And so if there's no other questions on either the rescheduling or, some of that hemp activity, I just, right, we only meet 3 times a year now. We finalized the board's recommendations at the final meeting in November. So just wanted to do, and right, this can be preliminary. There's nothing necessarily that we're voting on, but this was a list of recommendations from the last year's annual report. So obviously, I think, safe to say that additional dispensaries, was acknowledged by the legislature. I think some of the that number 4, the tax status, right, is assuming, all of both of our licensed entities, register with DEA and they are approved and, start participating in that process, right, they would have, the access to that equality with traditional businesses and not being held account to the 280E burden. I think also I know Carl gave his comments and being a proponent there, but I think if in some regards some of this obviously is some of a lot of Carl's very thoughtful and diligent work maybe potentially be reconciled here, but I'll just see if there's any other things that board members are thinking about or things that they would want us to research and look at to start to put things together for the final board meeting, or kind of leave it as the way it is, just an open discussion for now. And again, this is something where you can send thoughts to us, in between now and the next meeting to discuss, but just opening up the floor. Any thoughts in general? And again, that's not necessarily a problem. I think, we've kept it pretty concise. I think we've learned, right, it's best to keep it more straightforward. But if there's no comments, I think that's totally fine. And we will just kind of move forward with this list for the annual report in November. Sounds good. All right. Well, that was all that I had, Captain McKelvey. And, maybe we can just take a pause here just for anything that board members are thinking about in general, comments on any of it. can be related not to it, but I'll just take a second there. No problem. Captain McKellar, I think we can move on to our next item then.
Okay. For those following the agenda here, Owen combined 5, 6, and 7. So we're on item 8, board vacancies. Owen will provide us a brief update on board vacancies.
Sure. So we do have a little bit of a new, process with, the governor's office and the system that's used. We still have not received any applications to my knowledge for for the vacancies that have been in effect for a while now. But I did want to say, thank you to Chief McKelvey and Dr. Richards and Morgan, who is not here, but they've been reappointed for another term. So their kind of terms ended at the end of June. So we have them back on board. I will look at the schedule to see if any other board members are kind of coming up on their term. Again, usually that's a June period, so I'll let you know. But just we've had some issues with that in the past, obviously, but we've had no issues with quorum and great participation from the board members. So just wanted to thank you all for that, for making that easy for us. So thank you.
Okay, item 9, future meetings. Our final board meeting of 2026 will be Friday, November 6th. Public will be notified of any changes, and we welcome the public's participation as always. Owen, is there anything else to add on that?
No, I don't think so. Just wanted to, again, thank you everybody for being thoughtful with your comments and participating. Again, we really do appreciate it, and that's what this is about. And I think maybe at the next meeting, we'll have even more updates for you on some of these items that are moving, including kind of finalizing what did or didn't happen with some of the hemp issues. So, maybe a couple fewer non-answers, maybe a little less word salad, but we'll see. There's still going to be some of that as a lot of this gets ferreted out.
Owen, you've done a great job of summarizing a very complicated, situation and putting it into a really quite understandable situation of why it's so unknown and the dual tracking and what that means. You've helped my brain a lot to understand what's going on out there.
Here.
I appreciate it. I mean, again, I'm not it's where I rely a lot on Katie for, and people a lot smarter than me. So I like to keep it as simple as it possibly can be. But it's a fun part of this, right? Never boring, fascinating, a lot of complexity with it. So it's part of the fun.
All right, everyone, we've come to the end of our agenda. Are there any further comments from any of our board members? Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move, Shrek.
Shrek, is there a second?
Second.
Weber? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, thank you. The motion carried. This meeting is officially adjourned at 11:06 a.m.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in November. Have a great rest of your summer.
Thank you. Thanks, you, Owen, again. Sorry for my late joining, but thank you.
It's all good. All good, Dr. McKinnon.
Thank you.